die at the hands of CIA-assisted right-wing terror. At the beginning of 1971, Turkish society was in mayhem. Turkey's second coup was only a matter of time. Labor strikes exploded everywhere, universities stopped working, and young left-wing activists robbed banks, attacked US targets, and created urban guerrillas. The dominant party at the time was the Justice Party, a descendant of the Democrat Party of Menderes. The Justice Party's Süleyman Demirel, who had been elected in 1965 as Turkey's youngest prime minister, was overwhelmed with the chaos, and the military apparatus didn't like that. Chief of the General Staff, Memduh Tamac, demanded a strong government which will, quote, neutralize the current anarchical situation. After Demirel's refusal to grant the military more political influence in the anti-uprising struggles, the generals had enough. The tanks were deployed, and Tamac handed the prime minister a memorandum in March, meaning, either you resign or we'll depose you. Demirel, not having a real choice here, resigned, and the military leaders took over, exhibiting that
leftist robbing banks just makes you a Stalinist. They were fucking Maoists. They were Stalinists. These guys were real Marxist-Leninists, 100%.
In the modern state, the gun has the last word. But the chaos didn't stop. By the end of April, martial law was declared once more. Strikes and union meetings were prohibited. Thousands of people, communists, trade unionists, left-leaning academics, and journalists, faced harsh sentences and suffered systematic torture. Left publications were banned and confiscated. The fascist ones were left untouched, of course.
That's
After
weird.
the People's Liberation Army of Turkey, short PHKO, abducted an Israeli consul in May, the government escalated their ruthless repression. The 1961 constitution was regarded as too permissive of left ideologies and was amended.
That's so strange because you hear Erdogan and all these other like Turkish people as a population are obviously anti-Israel by incredibly wide margins. Turkish government, on the other hand, has oftentimes collaborated with the Israeli government and Israeli authorities and Israeli espionage agencies.
Meanwhile, the infamous Ziverbey Villa in Istanbul served as a torture center, where the CIA trained specialists and the Grey Wolves in the MIT anti-counterguerrilla interrogated countless people, employing physical and psychological torture. It's here where the term counterguerrilla was mentioned for the first time to anyone who wasn't a member. A well-known journalist who was tortured there later wrote that they told him, quote, "We are the counterguerrilla. Even the President of the Republic cannot touch us." As repression and the contradictions within Turkish society intensified, and due to events in France, Vietnam, or China, a new wave of organizations emerged, and its leaders had one immediate goal: revolution. The communist movement was seriously weakened. The revisionist parties who had ossified in the hopes of changing Turkey through democratic reforms were crushed themselves. It was the military crackdown, and importantly, the great...
This is why I always say, like, no matter what happens in all of these countries, they don't just, they're never only focused on like the MLs or, you know, vanguard revolutionary parties. It is always a cross section, both in Italy and in Western Europe in general, wherever NATO operated. They literally gutted every aspect of left-leaning organization. This is precisely the reason why the Cold War was so unimaginably successful for capitalists, and the reason why so many people in Europe literally are, and in America especially, are just terrified of the word socialism and think that it's like, it means, you know, awful, it means something bad. It's just it's basically like a pejorative. It doesn't stop. It, depending on where you are looking at, depending on what country you are looking at, it doesn't just stop at trade unionists either. Sometimes it means, like, if you're a part of any kind of women's rights group, for example. Counter-guerrilla has threatened the CHP leader Ecevit, a prime minister of Turkey. Yeah. 7 assassination attempts, including one on U.S. soil, mind you, when he said he would go after the counter-guerrilla and hold him accountable. There was an assassination attempt on his life. Not one, 7 total assassination attempts on his life, including one on American soil. Here, I wanted to show you this. Wait, hold on. Where the fuck did he go? Here. Bülent Ecevit was subject, or not 7, sorry. 6 assassination attempts. All but one occurred in the 1970s. 5 happened in Turkey and 1 on U.S. soil. The most famous of which took place on the 23rd of July, 1976 in New York City by a Greek Cypriot, and on the 29th of May, 1977 at Çiğli Airport. Mehmet İsmail, brother of the mayor of Istanbul, Ahmet İsmail, was injured in the attempt at Çiğli Airport. Various testimonies allege that the weapon used in the Çiğli Airport originated from the Special Warfare Department, Special Forces unit of the Turkish Army. Founded in 1952, formed out of the Army's Tactical Mobilization Group, Seferberlik Taktik Kurulu, and it was disbanded in 1992 with responsibility for special operations then taken over by the new Special Forces Command. They were also funded and trained by the USA. During the Cold War, the SWD cooperated closely with the CIA.
Great proletarian cultural revolution in China, which inspired a new upsurge in revolutionary organization. There were 3 notable organizations that were initiated by radical students in this period: the aforementioned THKO, the THKPC, and the Communist Party of Turkey Marxist-Leninist, short TKP-ML. If you are confused, don't worry, because there were 100 other left-wing organizations in Turkey. But it's important to keep these 3 in mind, particularly the last one. Founded by İbrahim Kaypakaya in 1972, it accepted Mao's contributions as a higher stage in the development of Marxism. The party would follow Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, and the strategy of waging revolution through protracted people's war. Kaypakaya had been banned from his school for his political activism. He later went to study physics in Istanbul and became known as a great theorist and organizer in the student movement of the late 60s, which was partially inspired by the 1968 events in France. Kaypakaya had split from another organization due to their rightist line, such as their chauvinist position on the Kurdish people, paying lip service to their struggle for self-determination, but ultimately remaining vague.
Ecevit asked the TAF leader at the time about the Special Warfare Department and what happens with the Ortulu Ordenel that the TAF receives. The TAF leader did not deny the existence of the organization and said all of the expenditures are for good reasons. This was before the assassination attempts.
Or straight up opposing the formation of a separate Kurdish state. As one of the few original theoreticians of socialism in Turkey, Kaypakaya made fundamental theoretical contributions already at age 22. A leader from his former organization even assigned someone to go kill him, but that someone turned out to be a sympathizer of Kaypakaya and didn't do it. Kaypakaya stressed that the struggle against revisionism was essential in the fight against capitalism, not least because of how deep Turkish chauvinism penetrated the broader left in Turkey, and how it would hold the proletariat back from forming genuine unity among different nationalities and from developing revolutionary consciousness. To this day, Kemalism is a big problem within the so-called Turkish left, much in the same way chauvinism and opportunism plague the left in other countries. The Turkish left is known especially for being fractured into 1,000 pieces. And let's remember here that wrecking and splitting the left, or disseminating ideas to pacify it with the establishment, are still 2 key tools of the CIA and their counter-subversion partners around the world. Many among the Turkish left would rely on hopes to find help from progressive officers in the military, cozying up to a supposed anti-imperialist trend within the CHP, instead of formulating a definite, independent path toward revolution, breaking with bourgeois illusions, reformism, and Kemalism. Kaypakaya and the TKP-ML created the Liberation Army of the Workers and Peasants of Turkey, short TIKO, which formed guerrilla units in Dersim at first, now renamed to Tunceli by the Turkish state, where the aforementioned Dersim genocide took place, and which Kaypakaya considered as having the best conditions to start a revolutionary movement. The National Intelligence Organization, or the MIT, concluded in a report, quote, "Within the communist movement in Turkey, Ibrahim Kaypakaya's ideas are the..."
Do you think there's more of a chance of a communist revolution in Turkey, though? It seems like there's more revolutionaries over there than here. No. Fuck no. I don't think you guys understand, dude. Turkey's nationalism is not even... America, in many respects, doesn't have to have such strong nationalist opinions because America and its allegiance is more towards capitalism than any kind of national boundary. In Turkey, on the other hand, nationalism is is on an entirely different spectrum. It's like, that's why I always say, like, I understand the way that, like, that's why I always say that I understand why, like, Israel operates in the way that it does.
Most dangerous. The views he presents in his writings and the methods of struggle he advocates are, as we can safely say, the application of revolutionary communism to Turkey. The Turkish state knew what needed to be done with the utmost urgency. HasanPiker had to be eliminated.
Bro, you said, is there a revolutionary potential for Turkey? Motherfucker, let me tell you something, okay? Turkish people do not even operate within the confines of a fucking bourgeois liberal democracy in the ways that are basically protective of oneself. As in, there's still a popular movement for AKP that is only shaken, that only took a massive blow this past election cycle and still were able to maintain the majority. So you're out of your fucking mind. These motherfuckers won't even vote for the CHP coalition. You know what I mean? And that isn't even necessarily like a socialist one, obviously. That's not even a revolutionary one. That is literally a liberal one that is... Yeah, there was a huge potential for revolution. It's just that everybody got hanged, including, you know, this guy who, I don't know. It's just you're telling me to take my glasses off. I don't think we...
Among the most important student leaders of the time was the Kurdish Deniz Gezmiş, a founding member of the THKO, considered by many as Turkey's Che Guevara. He was repeatedly arrested and injured during his political activism. After Gezmiş managed to escape from the hospital while under surveillance, he traveled to the Palestine Liberation Organization camps in Jordan to undergo guerrilla training. He and other THKO members were arrested after robbing 2 banks and kidnapping 4 US soldiers in Ankara. Gezmiş and 17 others were sentenced to death in October of 1971. The sentence was presented to the parliament in 1972 and it was overwhelmingly approved. Alparslan Türkeş was among those who voted in favor of the death sentence. But his comrades would not give him up without putting up a fight. Among them, self-described anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninist, firm supporter of Stalin and admirer of Che Guevara, Mahir Çayan, the leader of the THK-PC. In order to demand the freedom of Deniz Gezmiş and his comrades and to prevent their execution, Çayan and 10 accomplices abducted 3 NATO technicians. But in March 1972, in the Kızıldere massacre, the group...
By the way, here's a fun little passive voice moment right here. 10 anarşist ölü olarak ele geçti, which directly translates to 10 anarchists captured, found dead, basically, okay? As in, like, passive voiced. They're passive voicing this. Anarşistler ölmeden önce 3 İngiliz'i beyinlerine kurşun sıkıp öldürdü. The only time where there's active voice here is anarchists, before they died, who knows how they died, took 3 British and used lead, like it's a colloquial term for like kurşun sıkıp, which means like put lead in the brains of the 3 British. The anarchists died. They not only just like murdered the 3 British people, but are literally saying like they put lead in their brains, okay? Which is crazy.
Technicians.
Your Turkish is pretty good for an American. Ne diyor lan bu gerizekalı bana?
But in March 1972, in the Kızıldere massacre, the group was spotted and surrounded by soldiers later revealed to be the Gladio counter-guerrilla forces. And in the resulting gunfire, almost everyone present, including the hostages, was killed. Çayan died at age 26. The operation was led by Fehmi Altınbilik, member of the counter-guerrilla through the Special Warfare Department. It's not the last time Fehmi would play a key role in the assault on revolutionaries. A month later, the president ordered the execution of 25-year-old Gezmiş and his comrades. Before he was executed by hanging on May 6th in 1972, he requested to drink tea and listen to Joaquín Rodrigo's Concierto de Aranjuez. His last words were, "Long live a fully independent Turkey. Long live the great ideology of Marxism-Leninism. Long live the Turkish and Kurdish people's fight for independence. Damned be imperialism. Long live the workers and the villagers. After the destruction of the guerrillas of Gezmish and Chayan, the state now focused its forces on Kaypakaya's Tiko. As opposed to Chayan's approach, which foresaw guerrilla units forming in the cities first before expanding into the countryside, the TKPML started in the rural areas. Aside from that, there were other differences between their strategies. Chayan's politicized military war strategy, or PAS, and the protracted People's War of the TKPML. But this examination will be part of another video on Marxist military theory. The THKO of Gezmish followed an approach closer to the Foucault theory going back to Che Guevara, and later further popularized by French writer Régis Debray, which put the guerrilla unit at the center of revolutionary change. Guerrillas were key for the TKPML as well. However, as the People's War strategy prescribed, the guerrilla is subordinate to the party. The goal is to ground the People's Army on the population's mass support. Politics is in command of the rifle, so to speak. So, Kaypakaya and his comrades, among them the Kurdish communist Ali Haydar Yildiz, went to the villages in Dersim, doing research on the terrain and the class composition in the...
The other reason why, like, communism is broadly seen as, like, an awful movement is because in Turkey, a lot of the communists, a lot of the socialists were directly Kurdish, of Kurdish lineage, and played significant roles in, like... emancipatory movements for Kurds, and therefore are like automatically branded terrorists from that front as well, because there was also it was also synonymous with an ethnic movement as well. So that's the other, like, ethnic separatist movement as well. So that's the other reason.
Towns organized actions against big landlords who tyrannized people, helping villagers with their agricultural work, knocking on doors and listening to their problems. This worked very well. Kaypakaya was well liked by the villagers. The Turkish forces knew about these young revolutionaries going around from town to town spreading their dangerous ideology, and the military commando launched a plan to move into the Dersim villages. Understanding these strategies and nip them in the bud was key for the CIA and the counter-guerrilla. Vietnam had just shown them that it's not always the bigger military force which prevails. It's not easy for the superior military to fight against the People's War strategy, since it's very tough to beat an army that is directly supported by the surrounding population politically, as analyzed by the RAND Corporation, a US national security think tank. One tactic of the military personnel was to disguise themselves as revolutionaries and to knock on doors. If the villagers sympathized with them, they knew whom to keep an eye on and whom to terrorize. But fortunately for Kaypakaya and Ali Haydar, the families hid them very well at their places. The police and military terror against the population increased. Torture and beatings became part of everyday life in Dersim, even becoming a major issue in the Turkish parliament. The region was virtually surrounded by the military commandos. Head of the commando, the aforementioned counter-guerrilla member, Fehmi, who led the operation that killed Mahir Jayan. One early morning in January 1973, by village, but this time he was unlucky. He asked someone for directions, But the village resident was shocked at HasanPiker's condition and took him back to their home. They notified a village teacher, but unfortunately, this teacher happened to be a reactionary. The region's mission command had already established contact with him, and he knew very well who HasanPiker was. The military forces got wind of HasanPiker's whereabouts and surrounded the village. The head of the command, Lieutenant Fehmi, ripped open the door and yelled, quote, "You are Ibrahim HasanPiker, aren't you?" "If you know, why are you asking?" replied HasanPiker in a razor-sharp voice. Then he was asked how he had escaped, Fehmi not being able to cope with the fact that he had slipped through his fingers. "I clenched my teeth and fled, as is necessary to escape such fascists as you," replied HasanPiker. Despite being brutally tortured every day for over 3 months, he did not reveal any information about the TKP-ML's internal organization or the identities of his comrades or villagers who helped him. He
Bestie Marks talks about Turkish socialism like it's only militant activism. There was a civil movement too, which was targeted by the Grey Wolves. He hasn't mentioned the Workers' Party or anything. Yeah, there is. It wasn't just guerrilla movements. Like there was a civil side, there was a civil front as well, which in the cities were duking it out with these fascist paramilitaries. Which was, of course, just as important. That collaboration extended. American fascism and like American aligned fascists would literally kill you in the fucking streets. And no repercussions whatsoever. No repercussions whatsoever. They had literally nothing. Like fascists could just come. They would cut your fucking hair in the streets if they thought your hair was long. It extended beyond that. Like it literally, it extended beyond just like someone who's a communist or whatever, but like suspected communists, people that they thought were hippies or socialists because they had long hair, would have fascist paramilitaries in the streets literally fucking hold you down and cut your hair.
of the 3 main guerrilla groups were thus wiped out by 1973, a huge win for the fascist state. As the counter-guerrilla continued to rapidly expand its operations, a new prime minister was elected in 1974, Bülent Ecevit of the CHP, who would soon order the invasion of Cyprus. In the same year, he said he was shocked to notice that there was a US-financed clandestine force operating in Turkey. The Turkish army general cautioned him against delving too deeply into the matter, as it pertained to the greatest state secrets. But Ecevit's suspicions proved to be utterly correct. I hope you're still here. Take a deep breath, because now we're gonna look at the most brutal sequence of years covered in this video. Considering the events in the early 70s, it's hard to believe that it got much worse toward the latter half of the decade, a period which many people describe as a civil war. In 1975, the Justice Party's Süleyman Demirel succeeded Ecevit as president. Remember that he was the guy who got couped in 1971. He now led a coalition with various right-wing parties, including Alparslan Türkeş's far-right MHP. The MHP now managed to infiltrate state security services directly, increasing the strength of the fascist death squads and exacerbating the ongoing repression of left-wingers. The coalition implemented so-called neoliberal policies, going along with many of the capitalist governments in the 70s. This did not exactly calm down the furious masses, as it further deepened the crisis. The government looked anything but stable. In these years, prime ministers switched more quickly than managers at Chelsea Football Club. Turkey had 10 different PMs in the 70s. But one thing remained stable and constant: the so-called deep state of Turkey, along with its CIA assistants.
This is really important. Deep state, derin devlet, is actually a Turkish invention, or the term itself is invented in Turkey. And it's really ironic because the deep state is I guess something that has been bastardized in America, and it's this notion that, like, I guess like some evil guys are trying to do woke and gay stuff. Like, that's what Americans think it is. But the deep state is basically just the American State Department enforcing its will through a parallel governmental structure, sometimes by way of fascist paramilitaries. But ultimately, it is a reinforcement mechanism of capitalism. You don't have a need for a deep state if your state is already capitalist. So in America, there is no fucking deep state because it's just the state, technically.
And its fascist militia detachments. The modern concept of the deep state is in fact something that predominantly came from an understanding of the secret network of military officers and their civilian partners in Turkey, and the involvement of the counter-guerrilla structure in the fight against communism. But the so-called deep state is nothing particularly spectacular. It just refers to the state bureaucracy which isn't visible to the public and which is an essential feature of any capitalist state apparatus. Liberals like to downplay this or frame it as a conspiracy theory in order to salvage the image of liberal democracy. But there is no conspiracy. It's just what's reproduced within capitalist class society. The modern state needs a stable bureaucracy in foreign policy, national security, lobbyists and corrupt officials tied to the private sector through 1,000 threads, through which it can systematically guard the interests of the wealthy. This is just what the bourgeois state is supposed to do. In 1976, a certain Recep Tayyip Erdogan entered politics by joining an anti-communist action group, the National Turkish Student Union, one of many right-wing organizations emerging at the time, who were soon to meet an opportunity to lash out in a big way. On International Workers' Day in 1977, over 500,000 protesters gathered at the Taksim Square in Istanbul. And then, all of a sudden, some people opened fire on the crowd. Masked snipers shot people from nearby buildings, such as the Intercontinental Hotel. The massive crowd panicked. The shooting lasted for about 20 minutes. Around 40 people were killed and about 200 injured. Over 500 protesters were detained by the police. During the whole 20 minutes, thousands of police officers who were on the scene just stood there and did not intervene. Who started the shooting? Opposition leader Bülent Ecevit suspected it was the counter-guerrilla. Quote, "Some organizations and forces within the state, but outside the control of the democratic state of law, have to be taken under control without losing time. The counter-guerrilla is running an offensive and has a finger in the May 1st incident."
This is like a real fucking I'm gonna blow up the CIA to 1,000 pieces moment. And it's not like Ecevit is like a revolutionary figure in and of itself. Neither was JFK, of course. But, you know, it's just so weird. There's always like, I don't know. There's always just some chaos occurring, and it turns bloody, and then the police automatically defend the fascists because it's a conspiracy. This isn't a conspiracy. These guys were the counter-guerrilla, the counter-guerrillas were literally directly funded and trained by the CIA, and the snipers that were fucking shooting from the Intercontinental Hotel, which was suspiciously empty / American-owned, happened to be a staging ground for them. I don't know how that happened. The conspiracy in and of itself is that The conspiracy in and of itself is basically that they conspired. Not that there was a conspiracy theory, that they conspired. They worked with the American government directly.
Leaders of trade unions stated that this was clearly a plan of the CIA. One of them said that there were Americans in the Intercontinental Hotel and that the hotel had been closed to the public on that day. 3 days before the incident, it was alleged